number?
No, I was.
You had a guess.
A scanner darkly.
This attitude of mine shows up in my recent novel, A Scanner Darkly, where a narcotics agent winds up reporting on himself, turning over information on himself to his higher-ups. The paranoia of the Nixon period was so great by the government and also by the counterculture, the Berkeley people. Anybody like me who grew up and was part of the Berkeley counterculture became a marked man during the Nixon administration.
A Scanner Darkly came from his difficulties in his own life and his friends and family.
The paranoia that they feel is that similar to the paranoia a lot of people are starting to feel, just if you can't speak out.
It seems even more important and relevant today than when we started, in lieu of the current headlines, the administration and the surveillance that's sort of being carried out now.
It is impossible to tell how much of our fears were justified. I mean, there were illegal entries. My house was broken into, my files were blown open, my papers were stolen. We never found out who did it. My attorney said it was the government. There was no doubt that it was the government. But what they were looking for, I don't know. What they thought I was doing, I don't know. I don't even know if it was the government. But there were many such illegal entries, and an experience like that tends to make you very paranoid, you know, that you are suspected of some crime.
I think he was able to get his ideas across through the genre of science fiction. But I think it took him a long time to come to terms with being in a genre that wasn't necessarily the most respected.
The position which writers such as myself hold in America those positions are very lowly. Science fiction is considered to be something for adolescents, for just high school kids, and for disturbed people in general to read in America.
I guess we're officially in the genre of science fiction, but it didn't feel that way to me. It felt very contemporary and very real world.
So we are limited in our writing to books which have no sex, no violence, and no deep ideas. Just something of an adventure kind of nature, what we call space opera, which is just westerns set in the future.
It doesn't really fit within the genre of the sort of Hollywood sci-fi spectacular.
I felt like I had Philip K. Dick, his family, and then however many, I don't know how many millions of fans out there who kind of feel a special relation, not only to him, but maybe this particular work. You feel like you have this weight on you that is, I felt great about it because I thought, you know, it's a little daunting, but I also felt like I was up for that challenge, and I didn't think they would be disappointed at the end of the day.
I think the screenplay's great. Yeah, I do. I think the essence of the story is there. A lot of the dialogue is there, which is great. There's a lot of humor in the book. I mean, there's some sadness and some pain. There's also a lot of humor, and he's kept a lot of that great dialogue and humor between the characters.
Charles Freck, becoming progressively more and more depressed by what was happening to everyone he knew, decided finally to off himself. There was no problem in the circles where he hung out in putting an end to yourself. You just bought into a large quantity of reds and took them with some cheap wine late at night with the phone off the hook so that no one could interrupt you. The planning part had to do with the artifacts you wanted found on you by later archaeologists, so they'd know from which stratum you came, and also could piece together where your head had been at the time you did it. He spent several days deciding on the artifacts, much longer than he had spent deciding to kill himself, and approximately the same time required to get that many reds. He would be found lying on his back, on his bed, with a copy of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, which would prove he had been a misunderstood Superman rejected by the masses, and so, in a sense, murdered by their scorn. And an unfinished letter to Exxon protesting the cancellation of his gas credit card. That way, he could indict the system and achieve something by his death over and above what the death itself achieved.
Richard Linklater's adaptation, the director and writer, he wrote a really great adaptation, I felt, and representation of the book.
Well, I thought it was probably the strangest script I've ever read, and I knew Keanu was doing it, and Rick was directing, and I thought, all right, well, these guys are pretty smart and on a good roll. I wonder how this will turn out.
Well, I was very confused by the script at first. I mean, it's a bizarre kind of story, you know, with stories within stories, or really more to the point, you know, strange realities within strange, you know, you don't know what's real and what's illusion.
It's one of the most challenging pieces of literature that I've ever read. Both the book and Richard's adaptation, the script.
You know, Rick called me up and said, you know, I wrote this part for you. I mean, it's obviously written, but...
The dead should, if possible, serve the purposes of the living.
I said I wanted to make this book. I think Philip K. Dick deserves a thorough adaptation of his work to tell the whole story, not just pluck a few ideas and do something else with it. I like this story, and to me, I always responded to it because it seemed very personal. I could tell just by reading this that, oh, this was his life. It had to be.
I kept thinking, you know, I'll probably understand this better as you know, the time goes on, but with your leg, I was still confused. But
let's go, guys! Let's go kick some ass!
I don't know how you prepare for something like this.
Not so fast,
You are flying. Accelerate. Steady. Accelerate.
Slow down.
Jesus. Son of a bitch! Hey! Come on! Accelerate!
No, I think we go right on action.
Rick, you know, he has an amazing, he is the most laid-back director I ever worked with. I never saw him even remotely get uptight about anything.
He's still a tyrannical megalomaniac. I wouldn't say like Adolf Hitler, but like Mussolini, something like that. I'm just kidding.
I can only think of a couple other people he reminds me of, like Oliver Stone and Robert Altman, and that there's this incredible sense of you really feel trusted, and also, you know, at the end of every day, you're just squoze dry.
And also, he does encourage everybody to contribute and to try things.
Oh, it's funny, you're doing it soft and conspiratorial, and then you're like,
He's got this big graph going on in his head, kind of almost like, I don't know, like playing bingo or something, where he kind of knows like where all the numbers are and how to do it.
Well, I want to see the positions, actually.
He's just one of the finest directors I've ever worked with. The detail and what he brings and the attitude he has, the way he sees them from an angle that most people wouldn't know exists.
I can definitely sense that kind of college ball, like the real athletic mentality, a well-seasoned, you know, ball player, so that it's kind of like he'll say, like, you play like you practice, and, you know, a lot of his terminology translates well into artistic endeavors, you know.
Kind of under there, but no dialogue.
I've got 2 kids. 2 girls. Little ones. I don't believe you do. You're not supposed to. Maybe not.
With Arthur, you know, he's the family man. He's got a wife and kids. He's going down this kind of conceptual path of marriage and husband and father, and he, you know, like he says, I hate my life. Nothing would ever change. This would never end. And there's something inside him where he's not happy. He breaks out of it, you know, without regret.
Oh, I love Keanu. I mean, I thought about this several years ago. I was seeing if he would be available. I think he was right in the middle of Matrix land at that point, and he wasn't interested in doing like another sci-fi thing or whatever. So I made another run at it a couple years later. So I was kind of obsessed with him being Bob Arthur. I just felt like he'd be great.
Arthur is manipulated, right? I mean, he's manipulated through his own desire.
He looks, does he not, like constantly shifting, vague blur and nothing more, am I right?
Bob Arctor is this really kind of seemingly benevolent and resigned guy who's been through, you know, a wife and kids, and now we've kind of come in to become his surrogate, kind of, you know, degenerate family.
Arctor has lost it so much and has been using this drug for so long, which he was clearly told to use. And if you're going to be a good undercover agent, you use it, but, you know, you control it. Well, you can't tell someone that with an addictive drug.
There's a point where Fred becomes Fred, Arctor's Arctor, and Bruce is the, you know, where they come out, I guess, destroyed, obliviated, brought to neutral.
Good news. I think I got you transferred to one of our farms.
Literally, like with each scene and passage, I would kind of mark down what page in the book it was, and then I would write down certain comments that the author had written, Philip K. Dick, about the character, or what the character was saying, or how he felt.
He's kind of like just kind of participating, but I think we needed a little strange element, I think.
It was odd, because while I was playing Arctor, I learned about Fred sometimes, and then when I was playing Fred, I learned a bit about Arctor. And they start to look, you know, Arctor doesn't really look at Fred. Fred looks at Arctor.
He would say, hey, I got this German translated, you know, from the book. Here's what it says, you know, like, what does that mean? You know, we're just always talking. He's always engaged, you know. He's at his best when he's totally focused on what he's doing.
And I really tried to, while I was working on it, to, in my own interpretation, just try to, and with Richard, just kind of get the right resonance, I guess, of each character, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, you know, use that as his thoughts. And so I really followed the book.
In this day and age, the type of society we find ourselves living in, every person of worth needs to have a gun at all times to protect themselves. And we're off. Boom. Deux. Trois.
Well, and then I start reading all the scenes with this guy Barris in them, and I just thought, God, this guy's off the hook. And he reminds me of those kind of propeller head guys that, you know, you knew in high school who kind of like, you know, knew how to take apart the bike and put it back together and all that freaky stuff. And I just thought it'd be really fun.
Robert, you know, he had his character had some riffs, you know, and his behaviors, and you know, it's so extraordinary, you know, it's expressive.
I hear once in a while them saying that Barris actually kind of really knows what's going on. So I couldn't even tell you if I'm actually ratting out my friend or if I'm just trying to get put in custody so I can be safe.
There weren't a lot of actors who could play Barris. It had to be someone who was kind of like, you know, evil, you know, kind of scientist, just had to be really sharp. Someone who had both the intelligence and the humor.
The doodads, man. Oh yes, of course, right, of course. How could I have forgotten?
But just sending him the script, I thought he's either gonna love it and take this as a challenge or not want to go near it. But I think he's just, you know, brave enough.
Say you have 1,500 words in the scene the next day. So you take all of your dialogue and you write it out like a run-on sentence. You write it out illegibly, so unless you kind of know it, by the time you write it down, it'll be pointless. And then when you arrive on set the next day or previously, you write it out in acronym. So Hell Hath No Fury, like HHNFLAWS. Then that's one part. So then, if you don't know it, you can't do it in acronym. I think that the mistake that I used to make and that so many actors make is that they become overconfident and think that they know a scene when they don't.
Motherfucker! They did it deliberately! We almost died!
My character, who goes by the name of Luckman, and, you know, obviously hangs out with Downey's character, Keanu's character a lot, and also Winona, you know. I think all of them are more aware of the surveillance. My character is completely oblivious to that kind of thing, but does have a high degree of healthy and maybe unhealthy paranoia.
Shit! I can't do anything! We're fucked, man!
You know, Woody is kind of like a silent movie star in the, say, a Buster Keaton type of physical, kind of physical humor, almost slapsticky.
But a lot of times it's about the innocence of the character, you know, and Luckman has a real innocence about him, even though he's kind of crazy and messed up in so many ways. My character considers Arthur maybe his best buddy, and yet also, and I have this very contentious relationship with Barris Downey, and yet we just love each other. You get to see, you know, there was a while that we were doing it, and I was feeling like, you know, I wasn't really understanding the dynamics, and then it just, one day it kicked in when me and Downey were doing this one scene, and then I get on top of him and I really start wailing on him, and then he's like, and he's squished against the edge of the couch, and he can't do anything but reach with his foot and kick me backwards like this, you know?
All right, cut.
And then he gets up and he goes and he grabs a whole stack of newspapers and just brings them over and throws them on top of me. And we were just doing this shit in rehearsal, you know, and that was when it all started to make sense.
And he's just truly a unique, as everyone knows, individual. So, yeah.
All right, what's your first line in the scene?
But to sacrifice someone, a living person, without them ever knowing it, it's incredibly heartbreaking. You know, I really found it to be heartbreaking both to read and to play the character.
I mean, Winona's so smart, such an artist.
My godfather, Timothy Leary, was friends with Philip Dick, and my father was sort of in that circle.
She gave me a note he had given, I had up on my refrigerator. Her godfather, Timothy Leary, had received, Philip K. Dick had been staying with him, but the note just said, "Tim, I'm moving out. You won't see me for a while." You know, like Phil, or bye. It was just some like note you would get from that roommate who's like, "Bye, I'm gone."
Well, I know with when Winona Ryder, who was playing both those characters, spoke about it, she did. I mean, she was always like, "Well, is this what is Donna doing as Hank?"
The story is about loss of identity and an agonizing search for the truth.
You're not supposed to know that Donna's anybody but Donna.
Woody came up with, because I was trying to study like maybe a certain actor to study their movements, like a big guy, you know. He was like, Brian Dennehy. I think that she's so good that she would actually work on her speech.
It wasn't necessary that she do Hank, but I'm glad she did ultimately, because it helped in the creation of Donna.
You have the right to remain silent until, and anything you say can and will be used against you when you, fuck this shit.
I would say that he's probably the most tweaked out. He's probably the guy who's lost it the most and doesn't really have a sense of, I think most of the characters don't have a real sense of reality anymore, but he's probably the most furthest
You're gonna kill
along.
each other.
I mean, Roy Cochran is wonderfully crazy. I mean, he's a serious actor. I mean, this performance he gives as Freck is kind of off the chart. But Roy has a very serious approach.
I don't think that Freck relates to anybody. He just sort of is there and probably has the intention of relating to people, but just can't.
You know, first day of shooting, he's got these kind of tics and nervous tics, but he was very consistent with it the whole way.
I didn't really do anything. I kind of just came up with my character like 5 minutes before I got on the elevator to go to work.
He's one of these transformative actors who becomes someone else.
I don't know. Is it supposed to be a comedy or not? I don't really know. I don't think, probably not. So I don't know. I'm probably not doing the right thing at all. I have no idea.
Hi, this is
meet you guys. Lisa. So nice to meet you. How are you?
Yeah, you grew up right up the street from us.
Yeah, that's been just a wonderful, addition, I think, to everything is having Philip K. Dick's daughters, Laura and Issa, kind of aboard with us sort of spiritually. They were concerned about what my take on the book would be in the film. She gave me his own copy from a library, from a first edition paperback that was her dad's. So I had it with me, I took it back and showed people, hey, this is Philip K. Dick's own copy of The Scanner. And to mix with his intelligence, he just had this kind of incredibly, darkly humorous view of so much. And they said, sure enough, he was always laughing and making people laugh. It was my goal to make this
That's great.
Very much a comedy. A dark comedy.
Motherfucker! They did it deliberately! We almost died, man! They almost fucking got us!
We're looking at some notes that my father left in his I Ching, which was the book that he used partially to write Man in the High Castle. So he's asking the oracle questions specifically about A Scanner Darkly. And one is, how will Scanner be received? And how will it be marketed? This one asks, how will Scanner sell? And the answer that he's received is, such allurement has no value to the superior man. And the next question is Scanner a good novel? And the answer is good. And the last is, will any actual films be made and not just options?
Monitored, observed, tracked.
It's important you as citizens continue to report all suspicious activity.
It's no secret we're living in a culture of addiction. Nearly 20% of the population can now be classified as addicts. And as far as anyone can tell, there is but one company that is working and helping the situation. That company is our sponsor, New Path.
It was always one of my favorite Philip K. Dick novels, but it seemed more relevant today than ever.
They have this technology that they're using and to be watched and to be controlled.
There's so much to this surveillance and counter-surveillance and people ratting each other out and the paranoia of whether or not you can trust the guy that you've been hanging out in the living room with for 2 years, you know what I mean?
Wait, what's the reality here? You're saying this, but do you really mean that? Because you're really, there's all these different layers. You don't really know what anybody means.
I was tipped off by the criminal underground that my house was being watched. The license plate numbers of every car that stopped in front of my house was taken. And these were not part of my imagination. These were actual events.
Is it something like 70% of your life you're either on camera or being documented in terms of your transactions, where you are on the street,
There are cameras everywhere. We are being filmed all the time.
And in this kind of paranoid world that they create for themselves, where suddenly everyone's suspect. But I don't think any of them are bad people or have really technically done anything wrong. They're just,
what the fuck?
It's the society that's sort of wrong and it's kind of tweaking them out a little bit.
The way that the government uses the media to completely terrify people.
Who's wielding the camera? What are they doing with the information? Even to be seen is not to be known, or that you are known. A scanner darkly through a glass darkly.
We were under surveillance. We really were. There was no doubt about it whatsoever. I've seen my CIA file. I've seen my FBI file. Under the American Freedom of Information Act, I was legally allowed to see both files. The CIA opened my mail. The FBI had a file on me. I've seen both.
This whole thing could be seen as sort of a cautionary tale, I think, both on a personal level, but then kind of a societal cautionary tale too. Because ultimately, I think you have these people who are just, they're just folks trying to get through their day, For whatever reasons they end up here, but they're really not bad people.
And they've kind of created almost this really insane family based on, what binds them together is this kind of agreement to be insane and co-sign each other's demise. So yeah, once you're in that realm of activity, you should certainly expect the worst.
He's making a statement, maybe a satirical statement about the drug war.
They were very frank. They were like, if it wasn't for drugs, our dad would still be writing today instead of, dying in 1982.
My father had demons and struggles with his own drug abuse, and he saw a lot of friends and loved ones harmed and or dead.
Taken too far, you go too far. You become, dead, paralyzed, brain impaired. You lose your life. Your life is, and there's certainly a kind of aspect to the book of mourning.
Substance D?
Ate his head. Another loser.
It's easy to win. Anybody can win.